track, and welcome to another episode of...
Hold on. It's my turn to do the intro this week.
What? Since when?
Remember? Because we agreed to trade off when Giraffe bumped around Europe.
But I want to do it again this week.
But it's my turn.
Nuh-uh.
Yeah.
I am returned.
Oh crap, hide.
That's right. It's me, Final Draft, back from my sojourn across the pond, and back from BronyCon. Thanks for tuning in to Everfree Radio. In this week's podcast, we review the most recent episode, Baby Cakes. Next, our resident expert mandolinist and interviewer extraordinaire MandoPony returns to the program to talk with famed musician and producer, the Living Tombstone. Stay tuned for an exclusive preview of his new remix of Sister Hate. Finally, Bones and Moonlight take a light-hearted look at the fanfic Airshipping is Magic. I guess it just floats their boats. Once again, this is your host, Final Draft, and stay tuned.
Hello and welcome again to Everfree Radio, here today with your episode review of episode 13 of season 2, titled Baby Cakes. I'm your host, Brushin Bones.
I'm Crescendo.
And I'm Moonlight.
And dear boy, we got a heck of an episode for you in this case. Baby Cakes was probably one of the funniest episodes this season, wouldn't you guys agree?
Yeah, it definitely had
no.
I'd say so. It was very centered on comedy anyway.
Oh, Moonlight, you big stick in the mud.
The funniest episode to me is still going to be less than 0 no matter what you say. I'm
So
sorry.
I said one of, not the funniest, one of. Now, that being said, this episode, to briefly summarize, is the Cake family, Mr. and Mrs. Cake, who we now know the names of, Cupcake and Carrot Cake.
Well, we knew at least Carrot Cake's name already.
When would we have learned that?
I believe it was one of the storyboarders who revealed it.
Well, anyways, we now have an in-show reference to their names. We now know that Mr. and Mrs. Cake are Carrot Cake and Cupcake, respectively. And they have had a new pair of foals, who they have named Pound Cake and Pumpkin Cake, boy and girl, respectively. They are a handful. And 1 month after their birth, the Cakes find themselves in need of a babysitter. And wouldn't you know it, they don't want to ask Pinkie Pie for help at first. I can't help but wonder why. And after attempting to find another babysitter, they eventually have to settle on Pinkie Pie, and hijinks ensue.
You know, I just love how, especially with Rarity, when she turns them down, she just doesn't give an excuse at all. And it's probably because of her experiences with Sweetie Belle, I'm guessing.
Quite possibly, and also just because Rarity does tend to be played up in some episodes as rather snooty and higher than thou on the food chain, you know. Just the way that she said, "Moi? Babysitting?" It's
oh,
just
that's
like...
so beneath me.
No, but all in all, I found that the premise to this episode was a lot of fun. I noticed that they changed up the model for the foal just slightly. It was the same one that was used in the Mysterious Ne'er-do-well, except for the fact that they changed the size of the eyes. Whereas the foal in the Mysterious Ne'er-do-well had these beady, creepy little eyes that were just like tiny little dots, and they made the eyes much bigger for Pound Cake and Pumpkin Cake, and it really helped to alleviate some of the real creepiness of how the other ones looked.
Although it would have helped, actually, in this episode, what with the whole Stephen King-esque scene.
Oh, yes. That's as our delightful host Bones puts it. It is such a creepy scene, though.
Yeah.
Well, it can't be helped. I mean, if part of the background music is actually a reference to Psycho.
Really? I didn't notice that.
Yeah, it gives you that horror genre feel when it gets to that point in the episode. Let's take it from the top, and we'll go ahead and divide it all up. Altogether, when it came down to it, this was a main 6 light episode. It was a character focus episode, and of course, the character focus in this was Pinkie Pie. And the moral of the story was responsibility. We actually get a friendship report at the end regarding that. In this one, we didn't have a friendship report at the end of Family Appreciation Day, since that was an Apple Bloom centric episode. The only appearances by the main 6 were when the Cakes were basically asking them to babysit, and the very, very beginning when it shows the nursery at the hospital post-birth. Speaking of, man, Nurse Redheart sure does run a tight ship over at that hospital.
Most definitely.
Well,
No tomfoolery in her nursery.
well, when you see how mischievous the babies can get, can you blame her?
Well,
No.
and Pinkie was making something of a tool of herself by running into the nursery and then proceeding to attempt to be loud and obnoxious as she normally is.
I will say, I love that Rainbow, Rarity, and Twilight pretty much already predict what's going to happen throughout the episode. Where
Oh, that's good to reference too. Is the types of ponies that their children are.
yeah, pony genetics are apparently crazy. So long as you have one family member, no matter how distant, that's a different type of pony than you are, then you can apparently give birth to that same type of pony.
That
Which-
makes sense, right?
Yeah, that makes sense, right? You know, I felt that this could have been interpreted one of two ways, and the more possible, the more likely way is that the writers just chose to hand wave the whole pony genetics thing as a way of basically saying, you know, don't think too hard about it, you know. Just remember that old Mystery Science Theater mantra. It's just a show, don't think too hard about it. But the second way it could have been interpreted, and the way that I find is most funny to interpret it, is Mr. Cake himself is trying to basically prove to himself that it's a possibility, that it's everything's all right, and there's no reason to be alarmed that his children are not of the same kind of pony he is. No, of course not. Everything's fine between him and his wife. No trouble.
Well,
See, with what you're implying there, since they were born at the same time, that would imply that if his wife were unfaithful, shall we say, that it was with an alicorn.
yep. Had to have been Celestia.
Oh gosh. Well, that being said, the subject of the children and their pony genetics comes into play later on in the episode when Pinkie finally does get the job, because she's so eager to prove that she can be just as responsible as anybody else and have an opportunity to babysit the children. All things considered, she finally gets that opportunity and is immediately beset by the weight of what she has done. And the children, one of the reasons they prove to be a handful is because these children are some pretty amazing children.
They're just
they
overpowered.
overpowered would probably be a good word for it, but considering that these are now canon characters, that these are characters created by the show themselves, can you really say that they're overpowered? Maybe they're just really talented, or maybe the other people are just not quite as powerful as they should be. Or
See, one explanation I thought about for this is that maybe just when they are children, that they get these surges of like extra energy, or in the case of unicorns, magic, and over time as they grow up, it weakens.
well, and that somewhat makes sense, because Twilight and Rarity say that with unicorn babies have magical surges at the beginning of the episode, and Rainbow Dash says that once Pound Cake starts figuring out how to work his wings, that he'll be zipping along all over the place. Then you have to understand one thing, is that a child has such limited control, and if it were really like a surge, burst of energy, or something like that, it wouldn't be so finely controlled as it is when it comes to Pound Cake and Pumpkin Cake. Like, literally, what we see of them using their respective talents and everything. Pound Cake has, like, perfect maneuverability when it comes to his flying, and he's ridiculously strong. I mean, Are Pegasus ponies supposed to be that strong?
Well, Rainbow Dash created a mushroom cloud from. Then again, she was flying.
Well,
And don't forget, she can do the sonic rain.
She can do the sonic rain.
Well, it says
the
our
pound
fellow.
cake. He punched off a. He punched off a faucet. Just like nothing.
It says our fellow staff member One Trick put it. Pinkie Pie is either as light as cotton candy or pound cake is immensely strong.
Yeah, because he also carries Pinkie Pie around when he's flying around in the hallway and everything. And then, of course, going over to the other child, Pumpkin Cake has some real magical talent. Like, what happens when she wants to get to the toys that are in the other crib? Which reminds me, why do they have two cribs if both of the babies are going to be sleeping in the same crib? That aside, though, you know, what happens when she wants the toys in the other crib? She uses the magic of her horn to pick them all up and bring them over to her, all the while maintaining perfectly smooth control. When Pinkie traps the pair of them underneath the playpen, what does she do? She uses her magic to walk through a wall.
Yeah, I'm speechless at how powerful she is. But yeah, we've yet to see Twilight do something like phase through a wall. I mean, obviously Twilight can teleport, but Pumpkin Cake, she can teleport to... Did she teleport? Sorry, I forgot.
No, she didn't teleport in this episode, but she certainly did walk through a wall, and that's something. But basically, that reminds me too, the babies being a handful and showing off all of this stuff, giving Pinkie Pie so much trouble, despite the fact that Pinkie Pie normally has so much energy and can keep up with all of her friends like nobody's business. She is exhausted by these children. Even putting a show on for them doesn't help to really alleviate the issues with keeping them entertained. That brings me to one of the points I was going to make regarding expectations from the fandom for this episode. And I know that a lot of the fandom were expecting a musical number in this episode, but the one that we got, if you can really call it a musical number, wasn't exactly what the fans were expecting. Still enjoyable, but not quite what the fans were expecting.
Whilst we're on that note, I'd like to coin the term Piggy Pie.
Piggy Pie.
Yes.
I see. That's about as bad as her jokes in the episode.
How is that a term?
Well, name. Nickname. Whatever.
Okay. That is a pretty bad one, Crescendo. I gotta say that's a real snoozer.
At least it's not as bad as Pinkie Pie's stand-up.
No, it's just as bad.
That was some bad stand-up comedy, I gotta say. You know, I was expecting more from Pinkie. She's got so much potential, but going up there, I mean, she may as well have used the airline food joke. It was bad.
Yeah.
But this episode was a pretty simple one. Altogether, a pretty simple episode. It was a very, very cut and dry plot. Of course, it was Main Six Light. The only member of the Main Six that shows up after the initial appearances by them was Twilight, who came over to help Pinkie Pie with the babysitting. She inadvertently insults Pinkie Pie when she says that she figured that Pinkie Pie was going to need some help, and that there are some ponies that just can't handle the responsibility.
No.
And did Pinkie?
But they did appear before after they
I said
appeared.
initial appearances. As in the appearance at the hospital and the appearances when they were asked to babysit.
See.
Though, I will say on the whole note about Twilight, I don't think she was meaning to be insulting. She was just a fair bit oblivious. Because I believe she had nothing but kind intentions.
Well, that's why I said inadvertently. You know, this comes to help to kind of show that Twilight still, even though she's developed, she still does have that kind of not much of a socialite, not really thinking really hard about how what she says is going to affect the person who she's talking to. So she's basically just quoting off facts, you know, saying, well, some people just can't handle the responsibility. I figured you would probably need some help. Babies are a chore, you know, is basically what she was trying to say, and it's understandable that Pinkie would need a little bit of help first time babysitting, and Pinkie just took it like just like a straight up insult, because nobody thought she'd be able to do it. I mean,
But
the cakes went to every single one of her friends before finally settling on her.
but the thing is that every great character has some minor flaw, so I think it's a good thing that Twilight has this slight social obliviousness.
No, definitely a good thing. I really have to say that when it comes to Pinkie herself in this episode, I found her to have good dimensions, I should say, in this episode. When it came to she was proven to have a bit more depth. We would think that she would probably have at least some experience with children to a degree, just because if she's the main party person in all of Ponyville, she probably knows everybody socially. And even before like the first episode that united all of the friends together, she was probably friends with a lot of the characters, particularly, the Apple family, since they make so much food, and we all know that Pinkie's one heck of a glutton when it comes to that. So I would think that she would have at least been around to see like Apple Bloom and some of those other fillies when they were children, when they were just little foals. But it really helped to show that while Pinkie Pie's entire persona is, giggle at the ghosty, have fun, laugh it off, that sort of thing, just kind of live life loose and relaxed, full of excitement and joy, you can really see in this episode that even she is capable of getting really stressed and really frustrated, to the point to where, like, she just lays down the law at one point when she gets the kids and she puts them in their crib, and she's just like, this is how it's going to be. You're going to go to sleep, so be quiet and go to bed.
Yeah, that is partially, well, mostly due to the stress, but I think, like, the tipping point with that was the whole Twilight inadvertently insulting her, because that's when she kind of snaps and goes all stern on the children.
Well, yeah, because she even admits, Twilight thinks that I can't handle it, and then she's like, well, that's probably because I haven't been able to handle it. But altogether, this episode, it had a lot of good qualities to it. I'm not going to say that it's the best episode, because it did have that sort of event-based kind of feel that a lot of children's episodes often have. There's this particular kind of event happening. It had that feel to it that it was actually a very children's episode, children's showish episode. But that didn't make it bad. It was done very well, in my opinion, and there were a lot of jokes. Even the ones that weren't intentional, there was a lot of humor to be had from this episode. And all in all, if I were to rate the episode, I would probably give it a 4, just because it's really, really, really funny. Maybe a 3.5, just because it really was. It was a main 6 light episode, and not very many of the main 6 really got to showcase anything. They each made an appearance. I would probably mark it down just a little bit, just because even if, yeah, it's a show, you're not supposed to think too hard about it, I've always been the kind of guy who is overly critical, overly analytical of the things that I watch or the things that I read. And so the kind of just the hand wave of, oh, well, there's unicorn blood somewhere in my bloodline, and Pegasus blood somewhere in my wife's bloodline, or whatever. So that's why they're a Pegasus and a unicorn. That was a little bit kind of like, oh, really? That's the way you guys are going to handle that? But yeah, I think I'd probably give it a 3.5. Thinking it over, I'd give it a 3.5.
In all honesty, I'd probably give it a 4, actually. I enjoyed it, despite it having a very stereotypical babysitter plot, where the babysitter can't handle it at first, and then it turns out that in the end she can, and she's all responsible. I still thoroughly enjoyed it. The jokes were, what's the word I'm looking for? There were many of them anyway, and they made me laugh. I loved how Pinkie became kind of a one-trick pony in that the only way she could cheer the babies up at first was to dump flour on herself.
Oh yeah, she had to humiliate herself so much just to get the kids to calm down.
And there was an incredible amount of daw right at the end where the babies say Pinkie Pie's name, and it was just so cute.
Pinkie Pie.
So, yeah, I have to give it a 4.
I would have to disagree with both you and give it a 4.5. It's become one of my favorite episodes this season.
And here I thought you were going to rate it lower, since you were so quick to disagree with me when I said it was one of the funniest episodes.
Yeah, so did
so
I.
far.
Yeah, but Lesson Zero is my favorite episode ever, so.
So why a 4.5?
Well, you already said you look way too deep into things. I'm not going to fault it for the little things like that. Yeah, well, it was cliche babysitting episode. It still had its moments, like the whole Stephen King scene. This is little things like that you don't see very often that I found to be quite enjoyable.
Yeah, I would have...
Plus, I love me some grimdark.
I would have to agree on that point. I mean, the background music was amazing throughout that scene, how it just can suddenly turn from so light-hearted and silly and goofy to rather dark, and where Pinkie just goes all paranoid is that bit is just a great scene. I think it's probably my favorite scene from this episode.
I'd say that my favorite scene from this episode would probably be when the baby's talents are raging, when they're using their magic and they're flying around, and Pinkie's just completely losing it, and then Pinkie breaks down and just starts to cry herself because she's come to the point where she is broken and she can't do anything. But I think that the clichédness of the plot kind of did it a disservice, kind of marked it down, in my opinion. Like, it was done very well, but it was a very, very overused children's show episode plot.
Now, I have just one question. Why is it every time we get a Pinkie Pie episode, she breaks down?
I think that she just does, is that she's always smiling because she's probably got a lot of self-confidence issues. I mean, Party of One, a lot of people like to bring this whole, like, Pinkamena Diane Pie thing and make her look like she's some kind of psychopath, and I blame a fanfic that will not be mentioned for that kind of idiotic portrayal. And yeah, I'll say idiotic because I think that portrayal of Pinkie is completely idiotic. Flame me if you want, but I think it's all about more of the. I think it's a lot more about the depression aspect, the self-deprecation or the self-confidence issues that she has, that where she's over the top because she has to be, in order to keep herself from, because I've actually known a lot of people. I've been this way myself when I was going through my own bout of depression. Is that a lot of the times, if you're not medicated or anything like that, or if you're looking for ways to try and counter your depression, you will act very over the top. You will smile more often, or try to act really funny or entertaining to others, because you're trying to give yourself purpose and focus. And I think that she's got a lot of self-confidence issues, especially when it comes down to something like, responsibility, which I think is a little odd, considering the fact that we know that she was very clearly raised on a farm that had some kind of disciplinary structure, that had some form of more like old-timey kind of feel to it. They were probably very much like the pony equivalent of the Amish, is what they appeared at. And then when the sonic rain boom occurred and her entire life changed as she realized that, like, she wanted to do parties and stuff like that, and bring joy to people. I think it's odd that she has the kind of issues that she does, but maybe it's just something that she can't help. She just can't help but feel like she really has to work hard to make people laugh, to make people like her, and stuff like that.
I mean, it's pretty much as they say in layman's terms, what goes up must come down. And that can apply to moods as well, really.
Well, and in her case, she would always be down if she didn't constantly try to keep herself up, is I think what the issue with her is. Any other thoughts, guys? Any other thoughts?
Not that I can think of.
No?
Just any other thoughts on the character or any of the other characters, whether it be like Mr. and Mrs. Cake or anything like that? Oh, speaking of Mr. Cake, everybody like the 5 o'clock shadow, the stubble on Mr. Cake's face at the hospital?
That just brings to mind questions of if they shave.
How do they shave without
shaving their coat? Or do they even have a coat, for that matter?
Well, we know
Perhaps
that they
their
have a
skin
coat.
is just colored.
We know that they have a coat because in the episode A Dog and Pony Show, Rarity makes it a very, very, very strict point to tell the Diamond Dogs to be careful not to scratch her coat,
Yes.
not to damage it, because she's very, very keen on her appearance. But
besides, ponies are floofy. Floofy.
But yeah, if we don't have anything else to add, I don't really think there's much else to say about the episode. It was a pretty generic plot, but done very well. It was entertaining, and it definitely had its funny moments, both intentional and unintentional. I gave it a 3.5. Crescendo gave it a 4, and Moonlight gave it a 4.5. If that's it, I think we could probably wrap this up.
Yeah.
Alrighty then. Alrighty then. So thank you for joining us here at Everfree Radio with our review of Baby Cakes. This has been Brushin' Bones.
I've been Crescendo.
And I'm Moonlight.
And join us next time. Stay tuned, and we'll get back to you with more from our podcast.
Coming up, guest star MandoPony joins EFR for an interview with the Living Tombstone. But first, here's Tombstone's brand new remix of the Pinkie Piggy song.
Yeah.
All right, we're back. This is Final Draft, and I'm here today with a special guest interviewer and a regular contributor to the show, noted musician and all-around great guy, MandoPony.
Hi, everyone. I'm really glad to be here, and thanks to Everfree Radio for having me.
MandoPony will be joining us for many musician interviews in the coming weeks. We're really excited to have him, so thanks for joining us again today.
Yeah, no worries, man. It's my pleasure.
Well, the two of us have a real special guest. I've been excited for this. I know you have.
I'm just shaking in my hooves right now.
Today, for your listening pleasure, we have the Living Tombstone. Welcome to Everfree Radio.
Hey, thanks for having me here. I'm very glad to do this interview and this.
Well, we're glad to have you. I have to start off with a question that I don't know if you've been asked before. Where does your name come from?
The Living Tombstone. Well, it's kind of weird because it actually started from something much different than, the Pony fandom or something. It actually started a long time ago. I used to watch the Black Lagoon as some anime, and after a while, after I finished the series, I figured maybe I should create a rock band based on the show, and I called that rock band the Living Tombstone. After a while, it didn't really work out for me as the rock band idea thing, so I just stick with the name, and after a while I just decided to just make my music by that name. So there weren't really any kind of weird backstory behind it.
So when you go with that name, I've noticed that in some, I believe it's for your remix of Wooden Toasters, Beyond Our Garden, there's a nice video that goes with it that shows your OC pony and Wooden Toaster's OC pony. But I've also seen some videos where you display yourself as a actual tombstone with arms and legs.
That's pretty awesome, just saying.
Yeah. If you were to have an OC pony, would it just be called the Living Tombstone, or have you thought about maybe naming it something else?
Actually, I never thought of that. About naming my OC is something different. Maybe Toomey or Tomb or...
I think the only risk you run with that is having people think maybe that it's some sort of a zombie character.
Which, again, maybe not a bad thing.
Yeah, maybe not. Well, so I have to ask, we have to ask this of all of our guests. Tombstone, how did you become a brony?
I think it was about half a year ago or something like that. That when I remember I was just around Fortune. I was just dwelling around Fortune, and I just noticed there were lots of threads about MandoPony, and I had no idea what the hell it was about. It was just an outburst of bronies and stuff like that, and I thought it was a big joke because MandoPony cannot be a good show. That's ridiculous, and it's I'm just watching it, and then after a while, somebody sent me a YouTube video. I have no idea how I got this. It was, this parody of this. There's this, games they made this Nessa game basically that, there's the text-to-speech thing. So basically, they did the pony version of that, and I just enjoyed the video for two reasons. One, it was funny. And the second, it was I don't know. I just enjoyed the animation that came out of it, and just hey, it could be a really good show. And I talked to my sister about this thing, and we decided that we both of us would watch the episodes and see how that goes for us. And we just watched the entire first season, and after a while, it really got to us, and really enjoyed it. But we weren't really much of a cluster bronies because first of all, we weren't really sure that there was even a fandom around the show, so we weren't really talking about that much just because of that. So after a while, after I talked to Alex S, and it's only because we contacted each other because we both make Neon Cat remixes, and we talked to each other, and suggested maybe I should do more of that because I noticed that Alex S himself is a brony even before I did. So because of him, I actually decided to also become a full-blown brony and make music.
So, Living Tombstone, you're from Israel, correct?
Yeah, I'm from Israel.
Nice. And your name is Yoav, I believe, your actual name?
Yeah, my name is Yoav Landau.
Nice.
Where in Israel are you?
I live nearby a suburb in near Tel Aviv, and this is where I basically live and make my music entirely at home.
See, I'm a little bit jealous because I've been told by certain movies that Tel Aviv is where the best baklava is, but I also know that it's near the beach.
Best hummus and best pita breads ever.
Have you found that there is a very large MLP or brony community in Israel, or does it seem to be pretty small?
Actually, just recently, and I was actually pretty surprised that there is a group of Israeli bronies. And I just found about it just by random that somebody in Hebrew just told me that I should check it out, and I was like, dude, we should definitely expose it more. So I bet that there's many other Israeli bronies that are listening to my music or are watching the show that we can bring together and maybe bring a much bigger group to Israel.
That's fantastic.
Well, I hear you have a message for the Hebrew bronies. Have at it.
לכל הישראלים שם ששומעים עכשיו את הרעיון הזה איתי, אם אתם רוצים כאילו לדעת אם יש איזה קהילה או יש משהו שקשור לברוניס והכל, אני מזכירים שתלכו לקבוצת הפייסבוק שקוראים לה ישראלי ברוניס. לכו לשם, תירשמו שם, ככל שיש יותר אנשים, ככה יש יותר סיכוי שאולי נקים מפגש. ואני אשמח גם להיות שם ולהיות איתכם כאן, כי זה משהו שאני רוצה לראות יותר גם בארץ מאשר גם בחו"ל. And that's
Well, do you want to maybe just give a quick translation of what you said for the English listeners?
Oh, yeah. In English, what I just said is that I suggested for all the Israeli bronies that are listening to the interview right now, they should check out the Facebook page called Israeli Bronies and sign up there so we can actually arrange some meetings and some more, organize some more meetups so people actually in Israel can come together and, be bronies together. And instead of just realizing that the brony fandom is much bigger outside and not here.
Well, living in Israel, as we all know, there is a bit of a geopolitical struggle going on right now between Israelis and Palestinians. And I was wondering, from your perspective as a brony in Israel, do you feel like the values that the show espouses, could be applied to that conflict? I mean, do you think that love and tolerance and all those good things, could be applicable to the conflict in Israel?
It'd be really cool to get this perspective.
Well, it could be. I mean, the problem is, like, if we're looking from that perspective of trying to bring, like, what we learned from the show and everything towards the geopolitical problem here, is that it's very hard to consider, like, from different point of views, like, what is going on here. What I'm saying is that many people see it as a conflict that just could be solvable for just introducing friendship into the mix. The problem is that, when you do so many, for example... Okay. There's a religion conflict, and there's also a very much it's a religional conflict, and it's also coming from like different kind of standards from people, from Palestinians and also Israelis. I mean, it's very hard to consider that when there's so many bad leaders from like one side or from our side. Depends on like who does the bad decisions around, which is kind of like very very hard, kind of like a very stupid ping pong game, which is one side always wants to attack the other for like stupid reasons. It's really hard to consider. I mean, friendship is something that many people would like to see, like in Israel, beyond like between Palestinians and Israel. Oh, first of all, people who do like never been to Israel or something like that, it's not like I'm living under a tent or something and it's just being bombarded with missiles or something. I mean, I live a very normal life and it's going okay here. Just the problem is occurs just around like the places where it's much more considered religion to some people, like Jerusalem, for example, or like the West Bank, for example. I mean, places like this are harder to consider being okay. Again, I'm also coming from the standpoint of view that I don't really understand very much of it, but I'm just saying that it's really easy to pick sides here. When I also myself as an Israeli not really sure if like what they're trying to do is okay, since they are also trying to rebel against us and same thing against them, and it's really really hard to pick sides and really really hard to also give a really good answer for this. I'm coming from the standpoint of view that I don't really care much about politics or care much about the issue here, because it's an issue that has been going on for a long time, and despite that there's been some improvements or some descents or something like that, it's something that from my point of view I cannot really relate to.
I do understand. Obviously there's going to be, from both sides, there are going to be good points and bad points, mistakes and good decisions. Do you have a feeling that a possible and hopeful conclusion to hostilities may come from the Israeli or Palestinian government, or do you feel more hopeful that maybe it could come from the Israeli or Palestinian people?
I guess the people is actually where I much more feel motivated about, since recent times where you see in the Middle East there are lots of how's it called, strikes? No, like people really go together and try to rebel against the leaders and everything. This is really something that I'm looking forward to, and this is really great. And from my point of view, it's always good to know that the people are finally rising up against the people that always oppress them and always oppress us against many others. The reason that Israeli, for example, Iran long time ago actually really had really good relation to Israel. Just recent times after Ahmadinejad, if I'm not correct, if I'm not mistaken, um, is the reason that really it started to pick up to fall apart a bit with the relations between them, which is kind of like something that we wouldn't really want to. I'm not saying that us Israelis aren't, bad people or good people. What I'm saying is that we had really good times, and suddenly it just we become to the worst just because there's people that want something different for their lives, which is why I'm pointing to the leaders of their countries that they shouldn't really, being so feeling, oppressed and just like being dictators against, just because they live that way.
Well, I know in my experience, one of the real reasons why I became a real fan of the show was because it was so non-cynical. It was such a positive show, and it didn't have that kind of cynicism you see in, modern politics and whatnot. And I think a lot of fans try to, when they talk about the show, they don't really like to go into the political spectrum of things because they want to avoid that cynicism as well. Do you find that that's maybe one of the reasons why you became a fan of the show, is that especially where you are, there's so much conflict, or at least so much political turmoil, that maybe it's in a sense an oasis of calm?
Well, in Israel, like I said, I live in a very nice life. I mean, it's nothing. Again, it's like Israel is a really great country, and I suggest you two to come to sometime. Maybe we'll eat some hummus together, and we'll enjoy our life.
I would love to. I would absolutely love to be completely honest.
I'm told that Tel Aviv has baklava.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Because it's really okay here, and I feel weird that sometimes people from outside Israel feel like uncomfortable, like there's still war going on or something. It's not like that at all. It's actually pretty okay here. Just that if you go to Jerusalem or go to the much more extremist parts of Jerusalem, for example, or much more towards like the borders of other countries, it's where it's really going up, actually. So, answering to your questions, well, it's always why I love shows that are, not about what's political and everything. I never really enjoy political jokes about stuff like that. I really even understand them. Because political arguments and stuff like that, I rarely understand why people follow them.
Same.
Where it have nothing almost to do with what happens to goes with our lives. I mean, it does, but the point is that, for example, there are a lot of arguments in between politicians and stuff like that, and that never really gets me, understanding like towards what they're trying to do. So about the show, I mean, I love it because it's very cynical, it's very happy, and it doesn't really go beyond like the wave for like being too serious about subjects or something. Even if it does, it doesn't try to go overboard with what it does. In Israel, what I'm saying is if it's about like if it's because of where I am, and actually not really. It's actually more about because I always prefer some kind of a kids show or something, very happy. My childhood, like I said, is always something that I really, really enjoy, watching and listening to. Which is why I'm so like fond of like shows like this, which is always like Dexter's Laboratory or Samurai Jack or Forster's Imaginary Parents. Shows like that always show me there's always a good side in television, and not always, satirical or laughing against politicians and stuff like that. Because in Israel, it's like overblown. There's so much satirical shows about, the politicians in here, and it's crazy because people, for some reason, really enjoyed it, and I got bored of it like 5-10 years ago.
Well, this is a pony-based podcast, of course, and, a lot of people go to Pony to get away from things like politics, but I think it was really interesting to hear your perspective on Pony and the situation in Israel. It's really a relevant topic. It's a really interesting topic. So moving on, though, looking at the area, do you find that Israeli music and culture influences your music?
Kind of. My influence actually comes more from my childhood, actually, from my childhood songs and, nursery rhymes and stuff like that really got me, inspired, I guess, because that's what got me, like, as a child, loving music and everything. Especially the 90s music, also being inspired by music that were outside of Israel were also pretty much inspiring. But I guess that in Israel, there's, I don't know, it's kind of hard to really get inspired by music in Israel because the audience that listen to music in Israel is actually pretty small. Because there's usually like only ethnic, much more Middle Eastern style of music that all usually pop up out of Israel. So like I said, getting inspired out of that is very, very hard. So usually I'm getting much more inspired by music outside of Israel.
So you would say then that maybe the music scene around where you are isn't as expansive as it is online?
It's really weird because online there's not many Israeli producers or musicians that are trying to go as broad as what I do. Well, as far as I know, I mean, well, speaking of musicians that went way beyond of being famous or like, infected mushrooms and stuff, but not as much as I know, for example, online as what I do. If I know there's like others like me who do the same thing online and actually produce music and go trying to be much more broad as what I do, I'd be happy to know. But for now, I only know that I'm probably one of the only ones.
So going off of, what you've seen online and what you've heard around where you are there any electronic musicians who, because that seems to be a lot of what you've been doing, are there any electronic musicians that you can cite as real big influences for you or real big inspiration?
Oh yeah, for sure. I remember earlier inspirations were actually Fatboy Slim and stuff like that. Since I've been influenced by
I love Fatboy.
Well, he's a great electronic musician. He was actually kind of like my influence towards many other stuff that I've done before and now. I guess that my influence now much more have to do with people like Porter Robinson and Noja, Skrillex, Deadmau5, many correct musicians of now, but still combining stuff that I've heard from before, like Prodigy, like even earlier kind of a music production. I guess also chiptune is a huge influence since they really involve melodies into their work. So I'm trying to do the same with what I do.
Have you thought about going back and, say, listening to a Deadmau5 song or listening to a Skrillex song and remixing it or making it pony somehow?
It would be very, very hard because the reason it's very hard for me because I think from a standpoint where I'm the listener and I'm figuring out if it's really worth like remixing in terms of, for example, if I take a song by Skrillex and then only involving pony music into it, it would be very hard to accept it as something pony because it's already been done before by Skrillex. So remixing it would be a bad idea. But if, for example, I go to a live show, for example, and then I would play a Skrillex song and then put some samples over it, I would make sure it would actually going dead on, like on beat. For example, if Fluttershy says a yay or something, so it would have some like relation to it.
So you're just saying basically then you're afraid that music would be typecast in a sense, that people would hear it and wonder why you've messed with it?
Yeah, it would be very hard to consider that there's something, for people to go and say it's good to remix it as pony. Because like I said, it's easier to leave it the way it is, like as an original, and just make an original song that has something to do with pony, like what I do right now.
So, I heard you mention chiptunes as being part of your influences as well, correct?
Yeah.
Nice. Now, if I'm not mistaken, you've done some work in composing for games before too?
I have, but not chiptune really. Actually, much more towards flash games and mods and stuff like that. Actually, my biggest work has been, and it was actually pretty nice to know. It was a bit of a shock for many bronies also that I've been the main composer behind Nightmare Us 2. Of one of the guys who actually composed and made a lot of the sound effects for it. I actually also did the voice acting job for the zombies there as well.
Oh, it's fantastic. Multi-talented.
Can you give us an example of your voice acting for the zombies? I have to ask.
Hopefully that won't ruin my vocal cords, but we'll see. Something like that. I remember doing this. And then just pitching down my vocals to be low so it won't really recognize as a human voice, but much more as a zombie.
Nice.
Oh, I think that's hilarious.
Have there been any specific video game compositions or scores that you've listened to that have been inspirational or that you're just a really big fan of?
For example, a long time ago, like in my childhood, I used to be very influenced by PC DOS games. Back then there was only the DOS operation system, and there were many old games on that system. For example, I think Rayman was also a big influence. I remember the biggest influence on me was actually the soundtrack for Aladdin for the DOS.
Oh yeah. Classic.
And that was a huge influence because, for example, the original soundtrack that was made for it, it was jazzy and I loved it. And for some reason, it just kept me going, loving swing music that was also kind of jazzy and was trying something new with it. So it was actually a big influence.
Well, see, that's really cool that you mentioned that it actually kept alive a love of swing music for you, because I would say that classic music from even The Legend of Zelda, whenever I would play old games, that kind of made me love grand, epic, sweeping, orchestral, symphonic music. Even I would say that it influenced me personally, and I still love to write that kind of music to this day. But yeah, that's really cool. So in the actual My Little Pony show, there doesn't seem to be a lot of electronic music, but one of the ones that I recognize and I'm actually a big fan of is the music that plays for photo finish. What do you think of that music, or would you be interested in hearing more of that kind of music in the show?
Actually, otherwise, I would actually prefer more of the style there is now, which is much more, orchestral, like kind of nice for it to kid you and everything. Stuff like that might fit for like characters like a photo finish, since she is part of the high society kind of thing. So I would think that, for example, just sticking to what it is, because I think this is actually what more inspired me to try to remix a song that is actually not electronic, and then say, okay, what would happen if it is electronic? But I'm not saying it should be fitting for a show.
That's a great answer.
Yeah, that actually reminds me of something they've been saying, various members of the cast and crew of the show about background characters of the show. They've said, we aren't really going to go into the details of Derpy. We're just leaving that to the fans to work with. Are you kind of looking at the music of the show in the same way that, perhaps they'll keep it this orchestral style, and that they'll leave the electronic music or the remix, music to the fans?
I guess it's actually, it doesn't really matter. Because I think that sometimes that stuff like that is really cool, that they let like the fans to really work it out in between, like what kind of remixes, what kind of songs we should make and everything. Same thing that they do, that they actually focus on one thing and don't really try to stick out and appeal too much to the fans, just because we want, like we as fans would like the Derpy in the show. They don't have to exaggerate that and make it a main character or something. It's like paying respect, but at the same time saying, okay, we have to still remain, focused on like what the show is about and everything, and not to show too much of Derpy, because it is just a side character, and we need to focus on that. So same thing about the music.
That's true.
So that kind of leads me to my next question, which is, have you considered working more extensively with orchestrated music, or are you kind of focusing mostly on electronic?
More electronic, but I guess, for example, much more, let's say, epic kind of songs that I usually involve orchestra in. For example, September is a really good example. I mean, it involves electro, but at the same time, to involve the much more sensitive, much more melodic stuff. Sorry, not melodic. What I mean is, for example, there are much more softer kind of lyrics in this, so I cannot really just emphasis on the electro. So orchestra is something that I do use from time to time. For example, my next song, I'm going to mention it now. I'm going to work on a song about Octavia, so obviously I need to include some orchestra in this, and also the cello to be involved in the song. So involving both of this kind of stuff is always good to do. But yeah, I mostly remain electro, just because it is something that I'm very much familiar with.
Well, what do you say to, say, an artist like Jackalap, who kind of hybridizes the two a little bit? Is that a style that you would be interested in pursuing, or would you ever consider, working with artists like that?
The big, first of all, about Jackalap, he makes great music, but I guess it's kind of also like a style that is much more leaning towards softer music that are much more like Owl City, for example. And he's been, familiar with many fans as the Owl City of the fandom. So also, first of all, working with them would be interesting. But the problem is that working with any artist from the fandom, and it has been, I actually saw one time they were trying to do like a contest thing where the main theme was to actually work with somebody else. And it was a big problem with many, because many songs were postponed. Many artists couldn't really work with somebody else just because of the time constraints, and also because time zones and whatever, different styles. So it was really hard to work that way. So after a week or two, I actually figured that the best way to really work with another artist, if one artist produces the song and one artist records the vocals or have some kind of a lyrical idea, which is what I did with MandoPony, and I can't wait for him to release the song already. Which, if you're hearing this, release the song now. I made like lyrics for him, I recorded vocals for him, so he has the vocals, he just needs to produce the song, and it should be done by today, tomorrow, we'll see. And if, for example, Jackalap is going to work with me, so I guess the same thing would happen, that I would record the vocals or he would record the vocals and I would just produce it.
Well, and I mean, maybe one of your more famous tracks actually is your remix of Wooden Toaster's song, which is then rapped over by Mike the Microphone. Is that kind of how you worked with that?
Actually, that's actually, very interesting the way it's actually disinvolved. And I remember talking to Mando about this thing, is actually how Beyond the Tomb was actually the equivalent of the Ronic Snowball effect. Which means that I started, he made the original track, Beyond the Garden, and then I asked him to make a remix. He agreed, so I made the remix for it, and it wasn't done. So I noticed that Mike the Microphone was back then working on Beyond the Garden rap over the original. So I asked him to maybe work on rap on my remix since it fits his style better. And that basically evolves into what it is, which is Beyond the Tomb, the best. Actually, it's rated like #1 song in your in the top 100 of 2010, right? It's 11, sorry.
Yeah, Sully me, who put together our top 100 list of 2011, put it right at #1.
Very deservedly so, too.
Yeah, and I would actually like to point out to all listeners that Living Tombstone is on that list. I don't know, it's at least 5 times, I think, so.
Yeah, 5 times, and I'm very, very glad you guys put number 5 on the list, if I remember correctly, Good Old Days, because by far it's my favorite track I ever worked on. And I can wait for more songs like in that same style.
And I'll also take this opportunity to say thank you as well for putting in a couple of my songs in there. And also just thought I'd ask what makes that song specifically your favorite track that you've worked on?
I think back then when I started working on it, it was also for Toastbeard. Actually, most of my songs that I worked on were for Toastbeard. I mean, it's what got me inspired into making songs that relate to MandoPony because they give a certain theme. And you just basically work around it. So that theme that time was about making about the nostalgic feeling towards like what happens back then when Equestria was back when Equestria was made. Sorry. So basically back then like what happened if like a song was actually inspired by the good old days like back then.
Mm-hmm.
So I was I figured that many of the artists back then many of the artists who work on a song of that theme was much more inspired to do a ragtime or something like 30s music and something like that. So instead of just sticking to that theme, I said to myself, hey, I'm nostalgic, but at the same time I want to make it modern. So what would happen if a song for the 30s would be modernized and made it by, on this era? So it was also very much inspired, and also I love the song very much just because, like I said, I'm very much inspired by childhood music and childhood video games and stuff like that. So suddenly making a song that just makes some kind of a remnants to what I loved back then is something that's very much appealing to me, and it's always a good thing for me to always make songs that's about that.
I also noticed that Louise the Lab Rat, that song, it seems to be kind of inspired from a children's point of view as well. And I'm just a huge fan of that song. I can't stop listening to it. I can't get it out of my head. And I mean that in the best way. I love that tune. And what would you say, does that have the same sort of inspirations in childhood music? And maybe you can just tell us a little bit more about that project in general.
Well, about that song, actually, it wasn't really inspired by childhood as well as Good Old Days. It was actually inspired because the lyrics for Louis the Lab Rat, I wasn't really mentioning that, but I mean, I want to keep the friend's name disclosed so it won't, because he doesn't really want to be known. But basically, that friend, he asked me like, dude, there's this girl I know and I love her and I want to make a song for her. So I decided to write the lyrics based on her spirit animal, which is a lab rat. So I wonder if maybe, I'm not sure if you really can do this, make a song about that. And I just read the lyrics and I said, okay, I'll make a song about that. And since he told me that that girl loved Good Old Days as well, so I decided to just give it another go, make another song like Good Old Days, but make it about Louis the Lab Rat. And that's what got me inspired instead. So,
oh, that's awesome.
I definitely noticed, when I first heard your music, and it was through Everfree Radio's live stream. No, the first time I heard your music, I think the first track I heard was your remix of Winter Wrap Up, and I really liked how you built up and then just hit it with a hard bass and a hard beat. And I think it's kind of an interesting style to go for. Was that your intention with that song, to kind of surprise people, or what were you thinking when you did that remix?
Actually, it was kind of a weird thing back then because I remember the idea for making the Winter Wrap Up remix was actually by Alex S. I talked to him. I remember talking to him when I started the Living Tombstone, and I wasn't really planning to do more stuff about ponies. I was actually intended to just keep on making original tracks that has nothing to do with it. He just told me, dude, you have lots of fans that are bronies. You should really keep in touch with them and make songs about that. So he suggested I should do a Winter Wrap-Up remix, and I wasn't really planning on going boom and just exploding and trying to surprise everybody just as like I had a plan for it. It was actually a mistake because when I worked on the remix, and I loved the Winter Wrap-Up, so when I worked on it, I remember I was very, very afraid that people won't really love the intro because the intro is very, very long. It's about 50 seconds intro, and I was afraid that people are not going to get in touch with it, and surprisingly people did have the patience to sit through and listen to the entire intro, which is great. So they had like the whole experience and then being surprised by how big the beats are and everything.
Yeah, that definitely, like, I was surprised when I heard it, but I it caused head bobbing in my case, which I guess is a side effect of listening to your music at times.
I mean, when I make music, it's a really huge tip for many musicians out there. Always look from the point of view of the listener. If the listener is going to okay, I'm going to listen to this intro. Is this going to keep me interested? It's like putting up a show, and then if your first act is not interesting at all, you won't sit through the rest of the entire show. It's like the same thing with making songs for me, at least, which was actually a really big. Like I said, it was a big a risk for me to put an intro like this one because it's very, very long, and it would be very, very hard to really figure out how to make a song interesting when you have an intro like this.
Okay, so you do a lot of pony music, obviously, and it's all fantastic. And is there any chance you're going to be doing non-MLP related music in the future and releasing it to your fans?
Actually, like you see, Louis the Labyrinth is not pony. And I was actually pretty afraid of releasing that because I knew that many pony fans were kind of really feeling off about this thing. But thankfully, many fans remained very, very upbeat about that because they knew that the Living Tombstone always makes great tracks. I mean, they stayed with the impression with the impression that it's going to be great because it's still the Living Tombstone. And I'm trying to not sound like I'm bragging about myself. Sorry.
No, not at all.
But about releasing more non-pony tracks. Well, about that, I mean, I want to do that, but the problem is that I'm very happy with the fandom I have now, and I'm still in love with making pony tracks and everything. But I guess I'm going to take the route of, slowly but surely, making sure that I'm, sticking to what people love me, which is for my pony music. But with time, after, maybe, with time, people will get bored of the pony music, and then I'll have no problem, but actually to stick with originals as well.
I can understand that. I have an original music YouTube channel as well, and I've got to say I completely understand what you mean by brony fans specifically. They're so amazingly supportive, and I have about 1,500 followers on my other YouTube channel. And now I've just reached, I think I just got over 3,000 on mine, and they're the coolest audience in the world. And so I completely understand, but I think that all of your brony fans will probably follow along with you into whatever musical projects you continue to grace us with. It's always going to be fantastic music.
Ooh, speaking of followers, I'm actually pretty much shocked to know. I mean, I'm just checking my channel now. I actually hit the 6K mark of my subscribers.
Congrats.
Well, I mean, by the time that the episode will be released, it's going to hit the 6K, which is pretty cool.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah, and I have a nerd question to ask, and maybe other aspiring electronic musicians out there will enjoy this, but your sounds that you produce are just so fantastic and tight and bassy, and they're just delicious. Do you have any specific VSTs that you use or would recommend using, or do you produce and actually create a lot of the instruments that you use in your music?
Well, I do use VSTs. So first of all, I use FL Studio 10 Producer Edition. FL Studio 10 Producer Edition, and my VSTs that I mostly use is actually 2 by Native Instruments, Massive, Absinthe, FM8. I use Edirol Orchestral for my orchestral parts of the songs and stuff like that. I also use Hotel Sinus Reese Bassline, which is Reese based simulator, I think, and also Twig Bench Peach for making the 8-bit sounds that I use there.
Oh, those are fantastic. I use the Peach VSTs, or for anyone who doesn't know, just virtual instruments. I use those for my chiptunes as well, and they're just fantastic. It's fantastic. Eater All Orchestral is amazing too.
Yeah, thanks. But as a general tip for like many musicians, I do use Massive and stuff like that. But people need to know this. I mostly use like presets that I actually bought, but I never really make my own presets or any kind of stuff. I usually scroll down the list of presets that they have like in my library and just use it. And some people really hate this because I tend to use the same presets at times. But at the same time, I don't understand why go through the entire process of making a new preset when you have something that you feel comfortable with. And that's also the reason I work very fast, because I'm like scrolling down the list of presets. I hear something that I feel comfortable with. I just work with it. I barely make my own. So I guess as a tip, that if you make music and stuff, it's okay to use presets by somebody else, but you need to be very creative and be sure that what you make won't sound. You have to be original with it. For example, you can combine two presets that are playing it side by side, and then nobody really recognizes it unless you really pay a really careful ear to what you're listening to.
Well, you mentioned that you make some of your tracks really quickly. About how long does it take you in the creative process to make an average track, or is there a average amount of time that you produce music?
I'm very, 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 very quick, and you can ask Mando here how quick I am when it comes to making track. For example, there's a really fun story. Mando asked me to make a really silly hip hop beat, and it was about to head to work. It was about 5 minutes till I have to take my car and drive. So it was like, okay, 5 minutes, I'm making a beat. I made the beat, and then it's just the MandoPony, and it was so fast.
It was fantastic. It was like 5 minutes. He was like, seriously, oh, okay, just give me a second. And then he went off, and then he came back, and then I was listening to this, and I was like, this is really good. How do you are a wizard. Tombstone is wizard. It's fantastic. I love this, man.
Well, and I would then say, though, I mean, if you produce the music quickly like that, is that because you're feeling inspired, or is that just, when you focus on the music, you kind of get into a mode and then just, boom, produce it?
I guess it's sometimes like the mode kind of thing, because when it comes to producing it, I guess it's also a really good tip for musicians, is in the professional world, it's very important to be quick. Because many people are asking for like this and now for like the next day. And I work for commercials and stuff in Israel, and they usually ask me for the very next day for a song. And I'm like, okay, dude, I'm making it, and I just finished it like I finished it like by the time it's done and everything. But of course, when I'm uninspired, it sometimes takes me a whole lot more time to make a song or finish it. For example, there's a remix of Chop Suey by System of a Down that I some kind of finished it, but I wasn't really close to like getting it done because I'm not really feeling it. It's not like I'm really sure if I'm going to release it or not. So sometimes tracks like that too happen. But for example, Good Old Days, I remember it was evening, and it was like sitting on front of the computer and was 3 hours straight making the track from the beginning to end. And it was just waiting for the microphone to finish the lyrics, and that was it.
Actually, you mentioned that you've worked with some commercials. Are there any commercials or any TV spots sorts of things that, say, your Israeli audience may have heard?
Actually, I'm not really sure if I can talk about this, but
okay.
But I guess Israeli audiences, if you know big telephone companies like Bezek and also iPhone applications. I remember doing one for a big conference. Stuff like that I do most of the time, so yeah.
We keep running into this problem when we interview. Stuff people can't release.
I could tell you, but then we'd have to edit it out.
Yes.
And then we have to be quiet. Well, that's fantastic. Do you have plans to, is this what you want to do for the rest of your life? Can we expect for many, many years much more music from you coming at us from all different angles, commercials, games, the radio? I sure hope so.
Well, I'm very assertive, so for example, if one way works for me, then I'll stick with it. But I mean, I have no problem like focusing on making music for commercials and stuff. It's what I've been doing for this last 6-7 years because this is the reason I'm so experienced. I mean, I've been working with FL Studio nonstop for many projects, and just in the last few years, I actually really started to work on music for commercials. But I guess, like I said, I'm assertive, so if I'm going to make more songs, originals, and make albums and actually sell from singing and making music like that, I would be very, very glad to do that because it's also very, very fun. But if it's also about making commercials and stuff like that, to be honest, I mean, I love making music, like, anytime, but making music for commercials, the big pain beyond this is the way they contact you about making music for them, because they usually contact you through emails. and that's really annoying because you're always
Yes.
back and forth, trying to contact them, and you have no idea what they want from you because they are very, very broad with their answers. So sometimes you make a song for them, and they're like, I'm not really sure. I mean, you should make it much more, much more expensive,
20% cooler.
like that, and you have no sure how to really, answer this, and you're like trying to figure out like how to make the song like they wanted it to be.
Yeah, I can agree there. I was lucky with the last commercial that I worked with for a brand for a mattress company out of New York, and we actually had Skype conversations, we had telephone conversations, and they flew me to New York. I'm sorry, not flew, but I actually went up to New York, traveled up there. It would have been nice to fly, but the communication wasn't so bad there. But I definitely understand where you're coming from. But just the whole back and forth via email can get to be pretty frustrating. But I'm glad that you're doing it professionally.
Yeah, at least that I'm getting money. So I think the best thing about this thing, you actually get some profit from it.
Exactly.
Well, one thing going off of what Mando was saying with New York there, actually, one thing I think that BronyCon has shown pretty conclusively is that the fans love live music. We had a bit of a electronic set at the end of the one-day event with Alex S. and OmniPony, and the fans just ate it up. And the response to the videos that EFR has posted about that, has been pretty consistent. Everybody would love to see a rave. I hear, first of all, that you are trying to get to New York for the next BronyCon, and that I was wondering if that's true. Would you be interested in performing any of your music live? Is that something you've ever considered doing?
Once I'll make sure that everything is final towards coming to BronyCon, which is actually pretty close to because I talked to like relatives that I know from New York. I'm going to stay at their place, and they're going to come with me to BronyCon, which we're all three of us going to cosplay, which is going to be pretty cool. So about performing there, yes. So if it's all well and everything, I want to hear more details about it, and definitely I want to say yes about this thing because I really want to perform in this BronyCon.
Do you mind if I ask what you're planning to cosplay as?
Actually, we're just throwing ideas out. So one thing we can do is actually I'm going to cosplay as Tombstone. All right. Yeah, it's going to be like
That's
really
fantastic.
cool. Yeah, it's going to be actually pretty amazing. I mean, we're going to find a hoodie that we can rip apart and color it and everything. Find some used headphones. We're going to color it in blue, and find some bracelets and stuff like that that really match the Tombstone, the character, and then come to BronyCon and then actually perform live there.
Drop some fat basses.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, I was wondering if you have any upcoming projects or any upcoming songs or tracks that you would like to discuss.
Well, actually, recently I decided to be much more involved in making collabs because I really want. I mean, I have really good friends that I talk to, and they're really amazing musicians. They're not getting the same feedback as I do because I'm very well known by now. So, for example, I'm making an original track with Bronified, who did this awesome medley metal. Of MandoPony, so he's going to make an original track with me. We're also going to do a metal cover of Pinkie's Brew.
Ooh.
I'm also going to release a new track called Octavia's Overture, which is a track about Octavia's emerge into Candlelight, right? So that's 3 tracks. Oh yeah, and a track by OmniPony we're releasing together. That's called Pinkie Pie's Ending. It's a very green, dark lyrical song about Pinkie Pie being very, very old and she's about to pass away. Sorry about that, Pinkie fans. And also what other track? I mean, I think that's about that in terms of like what tracks I'm going to really focus on. But I guess there's going to be many other tracks in the next couple of weeks.
Well, that's awesome. I have heard that you have made a remix of a very recent song from My Little Pony. I was wondering if you could go a little bit into that.
So yeah, that was actually pretty funny, like the way I conceived it, because I watched the episode, and then I finished it, and for some reason the pig song that Piggy Pie was singing was stuck out to me so loudly outside, and it was also loopable. So I immediately grabbed the episode, I ripped the track from it. And then it was actually coming out because I talked to MandoPony here about, being consistent and being quick about it. And then just it kicked me. So like, dude, we gotta make a remix of the pig song from that show.
Have to do
from
it.
that episode. So just quickly ripped the track and started working on a remix. And yeah, now you can all listen to it. And I'm very happy that I stayed consistent and made the track so quickly.
Well, so are there any collaborations that you're planning on working on in the near future?
Well, there's many other projects. For example, like I said, I've been involved with like many other collabs. So, for example, I'm going to work with many other people, like with MandoPony here and Acoustic Brownie. Also, we have like a share of ideas.
That's true.
And I'm also working with Yelling at Cats. I just made a beat for him or something. And I also returned. I'm not going to reveal any more secrets, but Mike the Microphone, I made the beat for him, but it's for something that we want to like keep it secrets for now because it's going to be pretty cool. So yeah, the remix is a remix. Some time ago, I planned to do a new version of it because I remember there were a lot of comments for Sister Hate that many people said, no, like the vocals are are by two guys. It doesn't really fit it because it's about Sweetie Belle and Rarity, and it should be female voice actresses or singers. So I said okay, but so I actually contacted two really talented singers that I know. One goes by the nickname Pinkie Sky. She did the choir for September, like in the background, and I asked her to do the voice of Rarity. And for Sweetie Belle, I asked Sweetie Belle is Pinkie Sky, and for Rarity, I asked Tessa. I don't remember how to pronounce that, but she's also a very talented singer that I met through. She did one of the Becoming Popular covers, so I just asked her if she can do that, and she agreed to. After I recorded these, I actually finished it, and then I layered it on the original track, and then I figured something very interesting, which is it's the same track. I mean, it's the same exact song, so I didn't really think it would be a good idea to release the same song just with female voice actresses, so I thought maybe make it special, which is take the recordings and make a remix. So I'm going to give you guys a preview. I mean, it's not really done yet. I mean, but I'm still giving you guys a preview, and it's going to be probably done by the end of the week. A remix of Sister Hate with the new vocals. So I hope you guys are going to enjoy this very much as I enjoyed making it. So yeah, it's going to be pretty cool. I want to bring some shout outs to some people that I've been talking to that have been helping me a lot and giving me feedback. All the people like in my live stream, I usually put one link to a live stream one per day in my YouTube, and people come to see my live stream, and I usually work there on music. So the feedback that you guys have been giving me is always grateful, and this is the reason I keep doing live streams, because you guys are always helping me. Other shout outs is for Wooden Toaster. You're a great friend, and I hope you enjoy my gift present that I gave you for next week. I hope you enjoy that. And also, yeah, of course, for being a great fan and helping me with music overall. And I hope that we'll do collabs in the near future. Other shout outs I want to give for Alexis, of course, for introducing me to the Brownie fandom. Mike the Microphone, you're the reason I got so much publicity and so much from other people, and I'm pretty sure that I did the same thing for you. And I love working with you, despite that recent, times it's even harder for both of us to work together. It's still cool. And other people, Omni Brownie, finish the song already. I want to hear it already. Do it. And also,
Do it, Philly.
Yeah, what?
I was just throwing in our phrase.
It's
Do
our
it, Philly.
catchphrase.
Do it, Philly.
Do it, Philly.
And I think last but not least, MandoPony and Acoustic Brownie, you guys are also two great friends, and I can't wait for us to collab together in the near future as well.
It's the same tune. You're a great guy and a great musician, and I speak for Acoustic Brony as well whenever I say that we're just extremely happy to be working with you. It's been fantastic.
Do you have a URL for your live stream that we can share with the fans?
Well, the link is livestream.com. Yeah. So anyway, livestream.com/ the Living Tombstone.
And we'll have a link posted below in the video here, so all you fans will be able to directly connect to that.
And once a day, I start the live stream at around 8 p.m. Israel time. I'm not sure when it is in your time, but yeah, I usually post like at that time.
That'll be about 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so.
Yeah.
Well, all right. This has been Final Draft.
And this is MandoPony.
And we've had the Living Tombstone with us today. Thank you again for joining us.
Yeah, thanks. It's been great, Tombstone. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it was a fantastic interview. Would hope for next time I'm going to be featured on your radio show.
We're looking forward to it. And stay tuned for EFR's exclusive premiere of the Living Tombstone's remix of Sister Hate.
Hello, I'm Sweetie Belle and I want to play.
Hello and welcome to FanFic Review Corner here at Everfree Radio. I'm your host, Brushin Bones.
And I'm your co-host, Moonlight.
And today we've got something of a treat for you. It's a small one-shot, so there will be spoilers. It's random comedy shipping. And dear Lord, dear Celestia, I don't know if I've ever read anything quite like this, but I will hesitate to necessarily judge it right away, but I will give it an overview for you. It is titled Airshipping is Magic, and the plot of the story is Twilight Sparkle and the great and powerful Trixie are a pair of Zeppelins in this alternate universe. Think kind of like Thomas the Tank Engine. It helps you to visualize. They are a pair of Zeppelins, and they are in love. And it doesn't get much simpler than that.
Why?
Why is a good question. What in the world made the author choose to write something like this? Now, the author of the story, Blueshift, I'm not entirely sure what Blueshift's history has been with fan fiction, but from the way that this fic is written, it seems to me like this is intentionally done to kind of parody certain kind of fics that are out there. The Twixie pairing in particular seems to strike me as something that's played for laughs in this rather than something meant to be taken seriously. But all things considered, when I was going into this, I was actually expecting worse, because the summary just sounded so silly. But, I won't necessarily say I was pleasantly surprised, because while the summary pretty much got the plot of the story spot on, I was more or less happy with the fact that I didn't have to trudge through sentence after sentence of spelling and grammar errors.
Well, it's not like you'd have to trudge through much. It's a rather short one. Only one chapter, 1,197 words. It's fairly short.
Yes, it is. Now, this fic... I find it hard to necessarily classify this fic, because if it's done as a parody, which I suspect it is, since its tags are, or rather they include, comedy, random, that sort of thing.
Alternate universe.
Yeah, alternate universe, of course. Well, what kind of magic is going to turn Trixie and Twilight Sparkle into Zeppelins?
Twilight and Trixie both screwed up a spell.
Oh,
there you go.
There's another cliche you could parody. Twilight and Trixie screw up a spell.
Actually, I don't think I've seen many Trixie screws up a spells fanfics.
And actually, in fact, I don't think I've seen any.
I'm certain there's a couple out there.
Possibly, although the fandom does have this kind of idea that Trixie is some kind of magician on par with Twilight Sparkle, when the show clearly proved that her specialty was in prestidigitation and stage magic. She's a showmare and nothing else, and that she was outclassed from the get-go. The only reason she even lasted so long throughout the episode was because Twilight was worried about showing off, quote-unquote. But as far as the fic goes, and be prepared for spoilers, there's really not much to it. The summary pretty much gets it right out there. Twilight Blimple is a small little blimp.
Here we go.
Who... oh, gosh.
Prepare for puns.
She's a small little blimp. And... oh gosh, I can hardly take what I'm saying seriously.
Bones, I can do it. Twilight Blimple is a small little blimp, and she's been tasked with bringing medical supplies to the town of Hull. Don't know what Hull's supposed to be, but I assume it's a pun off of the hull of a ship.
Considering the fact that the country in this is called Airquestria.
Don't even get me started on the puns.
And her friend... Get this, Rainbow Dash's name is Rainbow Dirigible. Oh gosh.
And rarity is arity.
Did they even include a Fluttershy or Pinkie Pie name pun in this? I don't even think they get a mention.
No, they didn't. Although Fluttershy wouldn't really need much of a difference in her name, now would she?
Yeah, true. It could be something simple like Flutter Sky or something like that, and Pinkie Pie could be, heck, I don't know.
They did, of course, include Celestia, though, as well as Trixie. But we'll get on to Trixie.
Yeah, the HMA Celestia, Her Majesty's airship. But basically, yeah, as Moonlight was saying, Twilight has been tasked with ferrying vital medical supplies across Equestria. And halfway through the journey, she encounters her arch rival who has always treated her badly and who she has a real grudge against. A really, really large blue and silver zeppelin, over 300 meters long and covered in magnificent fins. And it's called, and forgive me if my German is terrible, but it is known as Die großartige und machtige Trixieberg.
No, that sounds about right to me.
Now, Die großartige und machtige Trixieberg is...
You just need to work on that accent.
Basically, go guess. Yeah, well, I'm not really trying to go for an accent, really. In all honesty, I think that I would choke on myself if I continued to try and say that line. Great and powerful Trixie every time was bad enough. Now I've got to say Die großartige und machtige Trixieberg.
That was good.
But Trixie shows up. And, of course, she's a show-off as normal. She's a big, pig-headed blimp. And forgive me for saying this, but I could not help but read the narration of this story in the voice of Mr. Topham Hatt. Sir Topham Hatt from the Thomas the Tank Engine series. Because, in all honesty, while this does have a small piece of fan art that comes with the story that shows them as blimps, there's no faces to really determine emotion, but I imagine them as having, like, those Thomas the Tank Engine style faces on their fronts.
But then how do they blush?
Well, yeah, there's the other thing, too. They're inanimate, they're animate, inanimate objects, but there's still use of words such as blushing and other emotional imagery. But... So Trixie shows up.
Turn off your minds, everyone.
Trixie shows up and is acting all high and mighty. Twilight's angry, doesn't like her, saying, you know, we have to get these medical supplies to the town of Hull. And then makes a statement basically trying to, you know, boost her own ego, you know, saying, and besides, I'm carrying just as much cargo as you. And pun ahoy, Trixie Berg's reply is, oh yes, Twilight, I forgot, you have a very spacious rear cargo bay.
The puns, they never stop.
Oh, dear God. Did we really need a sentence? You've got a big butt in a story that's about Zeppelins? Well, Trixie decides to turn it into a race, but the next few hours of the journey wind up being passed in silence. Twilight's eyeing Trixie because she's suspicious, and then all of a sudden, Trixie decides to go on thick with the positive. She starts saying, I never thanked you for saving me from the Major Ursa, which is supposed to be this giant sort of airship creature thing.
What it is, it's described as a semi-mythical beast that resembled a red biplane.
Yeah, okay, yeah, so a semi-mythical beast that resembled a red biplane. So
it's the Red Baron.
Well, the Red Baron's plane was actually a triplane.
I know it was a triplane, but...
Perhaps the author was mistaken in this regard.
I see the Red Baron depicted in all sorts of media as riding a red biplane for some reason. I don't know why.
Well, the biplane was the more popular, and the triplane did not last long in its circulation.
No, it did not.
When it was in the military, it didn't last very long. But basically what ends up happening is the story soon devolves into a big make-out session between a pair of blimps.
How?
And...
How?
Oh, God. You want me to describe this? Oh, God.
I just want to know how. How is that possible?
I want to know how. They aren't even depicted as having faces. I had to imagine, like, Thomas the Tank Engine style faces just to get some kind of imagery, and dear God, am I paying for it.
The only thing that comes to mind is mid-air refueling, as that's the term that was used.
Yeah, she said, Twilight said, would you like to mid-air refuel? And then Trixie replied, my idea was more along the line of docking. And I honestly, basically what ends up happening is Twilight's totally into it, and then it turns out that Trixie just used her in order to dump her cargo. So Trixie dumped all of her cargo into Twilight's cargo bay, and then flies off, calling her a loser. And the final line of the story is, "I'll see you again," she sobbed at the departing Zeppelin. "Oh, what huge vanity."
Oh boy.
That line felt... It worked, but it was also so forced to get that Hindenburg-related line in there. Okay, so the story. How does it stand up? Well, I suspect and hope that this was intended as a parody. And there's a lot of things with this story that if it's a parody, I can at least appreciate. But if it was supposed to be taken seriously, which I highly doubt, it would have a lot of things wrong with it.
For example, they're blimps.
Well, yeah. What kind of alternate universe is that? I need to kind of state a couple of my own personal opinions and preferences when it comes to writing Pony, especially when it comes to shipping aspects. And this is solely personal preference. It's not an actual like thing that leads me to judge something whether it's good or bad. It's just pure personal opinion that I despise the Twixie pairing. Twilight and Trixie to me doesn't mean good relationship. It's that kind of relationship that I understand why people think it seems so good, because it would be slap slap kiss, but the truth of the matter is that the relationship wouldn't exist. Period.
Yeah, I mean, that whole slap slap kiss thing, that doesn't exist in real life. It honestly doesn't. I mean, in some cases it might, but that's not the basis for a good relationship.
Well, there's an exception to every rule, but in this particular case, Trixie really wasn't prominent enough to make that much of an impact. And in all honesty, Twilight spent so much of the episode worrying about what her other friends thought. She never even hardly paid any mind to the presence of Trixie. Neither did Trixie pay any mind to Twilight either, for example, because even when Twilight was called up by her friends, saying, show that girl up or, whatever, it's one of those instances where I think one of the main reasons that people seem to like this is because whereas Twilight is the somewhat non-social, kind of meek, not meek to the level of Fluttershy, but certainly more meek than any of the other ponies in their group. She's that kind of meek, doesn't want to show off, doesn't want to make herself look like an egomaniac in front of her friends and stuff like that. And Trixie is the polar opposite. And Trixie also uses magic. And I think that's one of the reasons people like to pair them, is just because Trixie's another magic user sort of thing. And it's like, that's part of my problem.
Well, if they want another magic user, then just ship Twilight with Rarity.
Oh yeah, she uses magic to do that.
Or Twilight with a male unicorn like Pokey Pierce.
Oh gosh.
Or heaven forbid, Blue
Or heaven
Blood.
forbid, snails.
Oh boy.
Oh gosh. Now just wait. Anybody listening to this is going to decide to write a really terrible crack fic based on the Twilight Snails pairing.
Pretty sure it might exist.
Or even the Twilight Blue Blood pairing. Oh my gosh, could you imagine that? What kind of fiction could that be? Twilight and Prince Blue Blood. I mean,
oh boy.
That would take some serious...
I can't believe I completely forgot about this unicorn. Fancy Pants. Twilight and Fancy Pants.
Twilight Sparkle and Fancy Pants.
No, I would read that, because that's the best crack fic.
I would probably read that, because you know what? Fancy Pants, or a minor one-off character that appeared in one episode, I think that Fancy Pants is a really interesting character, especially given the fact that while shown to be well-off and wealthy, he wasn't snooty like the rest of the Canterlot folk, and he certainly felt that there was a rustic charm to all of Rarity's friends. I think that might actually work if the plot were right. You people listening to this, you might want to take this into consideration. But back onto my original train of thought. Trixie doesn't work as a magic user pairing for Twilight just based on the fact that a lot of people like to over-exaggerate her talents. And the entire point of the episode was that she really doesn't have all that talent. Everything that she does is essentially it's either mimicry of some physical attribute that another pony does, or it is some manner of like prestidigitation and stuff like that. And a lot of people like to cite stuff like oh well, what about that manipulation of the rainbow that Rainbow Dash made after flying through the water and stuff like that. And it's like, well, guys, rainbows are physical manifestations in the world of pony. I mean, you can taste them, and they're spicy.
Just how are they spicy?
It's no different than manipulating the rope that she used against Applejack. So, in the long run, she really is nothing more than just, a show pony. Her specialty is stage magic and prestidigitation. She is not a sorceress, or whatever you want to refer to Twilight Sparkle's kind of magic speciality. And a lot of people like to over-exaggerate Trixie's talents. And combine that with the concept of the whole slap, slap, kiss thing, and the fact that, you know what, I really hate to use the term, but there's no real term in English that matches it, and I do know that there's a lot of overlap between the anime fandom and the pony fandom. But a lot of the times, Trixie pairings wind up coming off with one or the other being a tsundere. For those of you who aren't well versed in that, basically a tsundere is a character who acts like they hate a person on the outside and is really harsh or critical and is always trying to make claims to the fact that they don't like this person, but when in fact on the inside they're soft, gooey, emotional, and are totally in love with the person. Think characters like Helga Pataki from Hey Arnold, and you have yourself a classic tsundere. Now, I hate that.
It's overused.
I hate it. Like, plain and simple, it's one of the most tried and true, terrible forms of any kind of shipping in any form of fictional media, especially since a lot of the times the tsundere is even going so far as to be, like, physically violent towards the person that attracted to, and it's usually taken as an opportunity to try and play that kind of abuse up for laughs or for drama that is overused. Now, immediately, that's just my opinion. There's plenty of people out there who enjoy the character. If there wasn't, there wouldn't be a character archetype, now would there?
I can enjoy it when it's used sparingly, but it's not anymore.
We kind of got a little bit off track of the actual story there as we started talking about, characters and pairings and stuff like that. But for the most part, this story was good for like a one-time read. If you're bored and you want something to kill 3 minutes, 3 minutes of time, and you're looking for just like a good chuckle while simultaneously you're thinking, maybe I'll try out one of those weirder fictions that I see sometimes. This is definitely one of the safer fictions that deals with a weird alternate universe or crack pairing or crack situation, like the two of them being Zeppelins. And that's probably one of the biggest...
Or the two of them being paintings.
Oh, the two of them being paintings. But this is probably one of the most safe for work fics that you will ever find. And when it comes to this sort of thing, I can at least recommend it. I'm not going to give it like a rating because I find that this is a very, very niche sort of story. So, like, I'm not going to give it the standard, 1 through 5 star rating. I'm just going to say whether or not I recommend it. And I definitely recommend it for a one-time read if you're just like looking to kill a few minutes while you're waiting or something. If you've got like your iPad or your phone or you're just sitting there kind of bored at your computer desk and you're just like, let's kill a few minutes while I think of something else to do. It's good for a couple of chuckles.
Yeah, I don't think it's fair to give a story like this a star rating because it's clearly meant to be ridiculous.
Well, and it's written for a very, like I said, a very niche audience. It's not intended to be on the same level as those, all those really big epic stories that get really, really high ratings on Equestria Daily and stuff like that. You're not going to see somebody comparing this story to a story as popular as Past Sins or a story as popular as Fallout Equestria or something like that.
Because you named them, you're going to have people saying them to me now.
Well, don't worry. We're going to review them in time. Give us time. We've got some things planned since those are a pair of the really, really big names in fan fiction when it comes to the pony fandom. And while we have already had an interview here at Everfree Radio with the author of Past Sins, Pinstroke, we will be taking an opportunity to go into an in-depth review and analysis I'm hoping for an active discourse and discussion sort of thing, possibly getting the author included in that, but we'll have to wait and see what things bring us. As far as Fallout Equestria, that will also come in time, and just be warned that my opinion will differ from a lot of people's, and you can look forward to a very, very in-depth analysis as to why.
Unless you spend time on our IRC, in which case you could see Bones talk about it every so often.
Every so often, if you drop by the IRC and I happen to be there, you talk about Fallout Equestria, and odds are I'll start listing the reasons why I have certain issue with certain things in the story. But all in all, I give the story, this story, Airshipping is Magic, a recommendation. If you're interested in just having something that you could quickly do a nice little chuckle on and kill 5 minutes or so while waiting for something else. I probably wouldn't save it and put it into a pony folder for rereading later, just because it's very much a one-shot in all forms of the word. It's not something you're going to reread.
Well, unless you're us and you have to reread it.
Well, all things considered, this has actually given me a lot of thought, and that's that I'm curious as to just how many of these kinds of stories there are, because I've noticed that there are a lot of those alternate universe stories, or even the ones that have a crack pairing, that may or may not try to be parodies, and I'm not entirely sure of what ones are worthwhile or not. If any of you who listen to the show and listen to our fanfic review segment have any ideas as to fanfiction of any kind, not just the ones that we're talking about right now, but fanfiction of any kind that you would like to see us review or analyze or recommend, just send us a message, email us. You can email either me or Moonlight directly, or email the main Everfree account. One way or the other, we will see it. Or you could just leave it in the comments section on our YouTube page.
Or our site.
All things considered, though, I think that pretty much does it for this story. Very short, very, very to the point. The summary pretty much summarized exactly what it was. Nothing was left a secret. And I give it a recommendation for a quick read. What about you, Moonlight?
Well, I haven't spoken enough about it because, yeah, I'm going to give the same thing. A recommendation for a one-time read when you're bored, when you got nothing else to do, and you're looking for something absolutely ridiculous and to make you go, what? And
it will make you go, what? Anyways, if you're interested in hearing more from us when it comes to fan fiction, leave us your fanfic requests either in an email or in the comments on our main page or our YouTube page. And as far as that goes, I think that just about does it. We'll go ahead and wrap it up here. This has been Fanfic Review Corner here at Everfree Radio. I've been your host, Brushin Bones.
And I've been your co-host, Moonlight.
And thank you for joining us here at Everfree Radio. Stay tuned for more from us in the future. So long, everybody.
Thanks for tuning into Everfree Radio. Before we go, I want to thank all the staff, fans, and guests that helped make BronyCon successful on January 7th. Everfree Radio is looking forward to going to New York again this June. Stay tuned to our YouTube page for continuing high-quality official releases of all the BronyCon panels in action. I want to thank everyone who joined us on our live stream and all our new subscribers as well. I especially want to thank 8-Track and 1-Trick for filling in for me while I was in Europe. Without these two, this podcast would never succeed. Thank you for all your hard work at BronyCon as well. You did an absolutely amazing job keeping things afloat. Thanks to MandoPony for his unwavering support of EFR and all his help with today's interview. Our entire staff looks forward to every song you release, and we're especially excited about your upcoming project with Acoustic Brony, Acoustic Mando Brony. I want to thank the Living Tombstone not only for joining us today, not only for his awesome music, but also for helping us edit this podcast. It meant more than you can know. Thanks to Sockware, Nash, Moonlight, and Skipsy for keeping our site running. And thanks once more to all our fans, old and new, who help our podcast grow. Once again, in case anyone forgot while I was gone, this is your host, Final Draft, signing off. Good night and good luck.